I was one of 7 children in this family. I was second one in a little town in West Texas, Cisco, about 150 miles west of Dallas. And my father was a land agent, but he had a small ranch out of town, and that's where we spent a lot of time on the ranch, the summertime, vacations, things of that kind. So it was a very wholesome, healthy type of activity and life for kids. Very, very primitive.
Carl Brannin's childhood offered little clue for his adult life as a radical, humanitarian, pacifist, socialist, labor organizer, and activist for any cause he felt important to better man's life on earth. Now in his 83rd year, Brannin's life reads like a history book, providing a documentary of the Progressive Era, World War I, the alienation of the 20s, the Depression and strikes of the 1930s, and the surge for minority rights since World War II. Through these years, he has known people like Lincoln Steffens, the famous muckraking journalist, Earl Browder, who later became top man for the Communist Party in America, Roger Baldwin, founder of the American Civil Liberties Union, Big Bill Haywood, the explosive Wobbly leader, and others. Until his wife Laura's death in 1965, Brannin was joined by her in his zeal for social and political causes. Now, Brannin lives alone, but he is surrounded by friends when he attends meetings such as the recent New Party convention in Dallas, or, as here, at sessions of the Dallas Civil Liberties Union chapter. You've been fighting for humanitarian causes since 1911 or so, about 60 years.
That's it, 1914.
Has there been much improvement in the state of mankind?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been a great improvement. There's been some very sharp improvements since 1936, you see, even in spite of the war. And it reminds me of a statement by one of the early radical leaders and prophets. He said, "The time will come when the movement will step forward with such speed that you never imagined before." And that's what's happened.
How would you classify yourself politically?
Well, I'd call myself an independent socialist to this degree that I feel free to vote for a candidate with a platform, whether he's a Republican or a Democrat or what, if that platform seems to embody the welfare of the people of the country. And so I've been that way ever since I decided that the Socialist Party didn't have any force as a political agency.
Tell me about your campaign for governor as the Socialist Party.
It was a very mild sort of a campaign. It's like the British say, I stood for governor. I went over the state in the car with another candidate, and we didn't have much response, and the vote, when it was counted, I think was about 850 for governor and about 1,050 or so for Norman Thomas. So it didn't register too well.
What year was that?
1936.
And you eventually got out of the Socialist Party?
Well, because the Socialist Party ceased to be a political party in that sense. I think the last campaign was in 1940 or maybe 1944. And it continued to have some value as an educational organization.
You're not a member of any party now?
No.
During the years, you've had a lot of epithets thrown at you, radical, even communist. How does that affect you?
You develop a sort of a rhinoceros hide, you know, in the course of years, if you just keep on plugging away. And it just never bothered me.
After graduating in 1905 as valedictorian at Cisco High, Brannin went to Texas A&M, where he became editor of the school paper. His conversion to radical causes came later, after struggling in Dallas upon graduation to find an occupation, first at a cotton mill, then failing successively at selling insurance and real estate. But now he encountered a book that changed his life, as it did for many, Henry George's Progress and Poverty.
In the meantime, I had lots of time to read, and I liked to read, so I stumbled on Progress and Poverty by Henry George. And it was presented in a rather utopian way that the present system of land ownership is wrong and that people should be concerned about social justice. And then I read Upton Sinclair and I read Walter Rauschenbusch, and who was in the Christian socialist movement. And that began to fix my attention on some type of social action rather than not just an idea of making a living and making money.
Now on fire with reformist zeal, Brannin moved to Cincinnati to become assistant to the pastor at the People's Church, which espoused the social gospel. Brannin immersed himself in a variety of movements and met and married Laura Hackle.
World War I came along, and I was a pacifist in that respect. And after I had to move to Kansas City, I registered under protest and registered as a CO. They didn't accept my status that I wanted to establish. But in the meantime, through a friend, I was able to get a government job in connection with the War Labor Board, which was a non-combatant thing. And so I worked out, that was the experience at that time.
Carl and Laura Brannin's paths in the next years moved from Kansas City and Washington on to Seattle and California. Meanwhile, a modest oil strike on a forgotten patch of land provided a steady, if modest, income, which was to last for many years and give the Brannins virtual economic independence. They traveled frequently to foreign lands, all over Europe, including 3 months in the Soviet Union. In 1933, the Brannins moved to Dallas, where they were to remain and become, if not nationally renowned, at least heroic figures in the Southwest to their reform-minded associates. Right away, they led a sit-in strike in the Dallas City Hall in behalf of persons whose welfare had been cut.
I was a socialist and active then, and the socialists helped to get to organize protest movements because they'd cut relief down to the point where people were just not getting enough to get by. And it was a movement involving both the blacks and poor white people too. And that's a great misery, you see, is a great equalizer. There's no race question in that. We couldn't get anywhere with the relief authorities or with the city, and so after one protest meeting, we just camped in the auditorium of the City Hall, which not where the City Hall is now, but in a different form. There's a big auditorium, and we just sat there and for 11 days and nights and to protest the failure to get relief. And we had a soup kitchen nearby, and so finally the thing just faded out. The authorities cut off the fans and they closed up the toilets, and they wouldn't let anybody sleep, so they just sort of smoked us out. So we really lost it, though. Of course, there were times when they did the improvement situation. The unemployed situation improved later when the government began to work.
I guess that was the first sit-in strike ever held in Dallas.
Yes, it was. As far as I know, it was. And it was very harmonious.
From that point on, the Brannins were familiar Dallas figures in liberal and radical movements: civil rights, welfare, integration, anti-war, voting registration, and they played leading roles in organizations like the NAACP, the Civil Liberties Union, and the Unitarian Church. In 1960, they marched in the picket lines to desegregate the H.L. Green lunch counters, and in 1964, while in their 70s, they carried pickets to protest the segregation policies of the Piccadilly cafeteria. Through the years, Carl and Laura made pertinent, concise comments on current events through letters to the editor. Carl continues to write such letters, and he spends much of his daily routine writing notes and letters to friends or to someone who has caught his eye. In 1965, the couple established the Laura and Carl Brannin Collection of Religion and Social Action at the Bridwell Library at Perkins School of Theology, SMU, still a growing collection of books for theology students. When Laura died later that year, her eyes went to the Dallas Eye Bank and her body to the Southwestern Medical School, according to her will. What activities in your life have given you the most satisfaction?
Well, working with people for movements which needed to be advanced or stressed, and not being discouraged at the fact that you don't always win. In fact, It's unusual if you do win.
Yeah. Are you basically a pessimist or an optimist?
Well, I'm a kind of an optimistic pessimist.
Yeah.
If there's such an animal.
What kind of animal is that?
Well, it's a person that doesn't get discouraged to the point that you just drop out of everything, and that's often the case. You know, people have family problems, they have economic problems, and they get discouraged because they don't get results right away, and they're good for 1 or 2 campaigns, and then they just drop back into the.
What do you think about modern day militants?
Well, I think militancy is necessary. I don't believe in violence or disorder, but I think that it's fine to have people young people especially, who are willing to who are not afraid to be unconventional. And that doesn't mean take drugs or anything of that kind, which I think is bad. But I think that you do need to know to protest, and that's what I would call militancy, active protest.
Do you foresee the day when there will be less need for protests, militancy?
I don't know, because conditions change, and what's the problem today is you may not know exactly what the problem is next week, or next month, or next year.
It has been said that Carl Brannin bears a remarkable resemblance to the farmer in Grant Wood's famous painting, American Gothic. But Carl Brannin's Americanism runs deeper, for Carl Brannin, in his own sphere, represents a strain of idealism in American life that may be traced all the way from modern-day crusader Ralph Nader to humanitarian Jane Addams, to abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, and to the revolutionary hero Thomas Paine.